Hi, my name is Noah Slovin. I'm a planner at Milone McBroom, the consultant hired to work on this first phase of the Hampton Master Plan update process. Today I will be walking through a truncated version of the presentation given during the virtual public workshops held on August 12th and 13th. The presentation will cover some basics about the Hampton Master Plan and dig in deeper on the topics of the Master Plan vision and coastal content. Our purpose here is to hear from you, the residents, workers, and visitors of the town of Hampton, about your thoughts and preferences about these topics. We hope you will take the time to watch this video and then participate in the planning process. Opportunities for participation will be discussed later. The last comprehensive update of the Town of Hampton Master Plan occurred in 1985, with some chapter updates since that time. The Planning Board, who is responsible for the master plan, initiated the current process and established a steering committee consisting of the full Planning Board, members of other town boards and committees, and resident representatives to guide the development of the master plan update. This first phase of the project involves the development of the vision and coastal content of the master plan. It is funded by a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration grant awarded to the New Hampshire DES Coastal Program for the coastal work, with additional funding provided by the coastal program for the vision component. There will be a second phase of the Comprehensive Master Plan update, which incorporates the Phase 1 work, while developing content for numerous additional master plan components, including but not limited to land use, transportation, recreation, economic development, and cultural and historical resources. Phase 2 has been funded as a result of voter approval of Article 10 at the March 2020 town meeting and is expected to go out to bid by the end of August. The town hopes to make a consultant selection for the second phase by the end of 2020. At the end of Phase 2 and the overall planning process, December of 2022, and following adoption of the plan by the Planning Board, we will have a fully updated comprehensive master plan for the entire town of Hampton. The updated comprehensive master plan will be an innovative, integrated, and user-friendly document, which will be utilized regularly for amendments to local regulations, pursuing grant funding, special town projects, and much more. The master plan may be best described as the instruction manual for Hampton's long-range conservation and development efforts over the next 10 to 20 years. As mentioned, the Hampton Master Plan can cover topics such as land use, transportation, recreation, economic development, and cultural and historical resources. Today, we're talking about the vision and coastal management content. We'll begin by discussing the vision. A master plan vision is exactly that, a vision for the future of the community. It is a statement of principles and priorities that serves as a guide to the rest of the master plan. The process of visioning consists of asking the following 4 questions. First, where are we now? What does our community look like today? What are its strengths and what are its challenges? What do people think of when they think Hampton? Second, based on how things are now, where are we going? What is our future trajectory without intentional planning? This is contrasted with where we want to be. What do we envision for the future of our community? What should we strive for in 10 to 20 years? And finally, how do we get there? What changes need to be made to our regulations and ordinances, our land use, transportation, education systems, and so on to get us to where we want to be? We've already started asking the community these questions through online surveys, a text message campaign, and other conversations. Priorities that we've identified so far include planning for natural hazards and resiliency in the face of climate change, protecting natural resources and habitats, improving the transportation systems in Hampton, including making road improvements, addressing traffic and congestion issues, and making the community one in which people are able to bike and walk more easily. People have identified consideration of the community character and aesthetic as a priority. This can be thought of as intentionally answering the question, who are we as a community? And then thinking about how the community's physical design and architecture reflect and answer that question. Other priorities include more and improved community facilities, such as a senior center, and recreational facilities, such as parks and playing fields. Other priorities include affordable housing, and economic development, including consideration of where economic development is focused within the town. We'd like to hear from you about this. If you're watching this, send a text to 603-968-0712 or an email to planhampton@gmail.com telling us what keywords or ideas you would like to see included in the Hampton Master Plan vision. You can also take a survey at the address listed on the screen or in the video description below. Public participation is an essential part of this process, and we need your thoughts about how to shape Hampton's future. The other aspect of this first phase of the Hampton Master Plan update is coastal resilience. Coastal resilience can be defined as the capacity of a coastal community to sustain achievement of community goals and social, economic, and environmental well-being over the long term in a changing climate. A few key ideas to pull out from this definition. We want to consider the social, economic, and environmental well-being of the community and balance all three of those aspects. We want the well-being to be sustainable over the long term in the face of a changing climate. And we want to build the capacity of the community to both bounce back from stresses better and leap forward following stresses, so that in the face of both acute distinct stresses, such as a nor'easter, for example, and in the face of long-term chronic stresses, such as sea level rise, the community is able to sustain that social, economic, and environmental well-being. One way to think about resilience is in terms of resilience to risk. Risk is a product of both vulnerability and frequency. Vulnerability tells us how susceptible an asset or an area is to hazards. Is it exposed to a hazard? How well can it withstand the hazard? How significant an impact would it have on the community if the asset or area were damaged by a hazard? Frequency captures both how often a hazard happens and how severe the event is. For example, are we looking at a major and rare hurricane, annual nor'easters, or daily high tide? Are we looking at multiple feet of flooding or just puddles on the roadway? By thinking of risk in this framework, we can recognize two important things. The first is that when we talk about coastal resilience, we are not trying to reduce the frequency of events, rather we are trying to reduce the vulnerability to those events. The second is that because of climate change, frequency is changing. Coastal hazards are becoming more frequent and more severe, and this will impact risk. As frequency increases, so does the risk. If vulnerability increases as frequency increases, risk will rise severely. If we keep vulnerability steady, risk will still increase with rising frequency. Only by reducing vulnerability can we keep risk steady, and by significantly reducing frequency, we can build resilience. The following is a quick overview of findings that came out of the New Hampshire Science and Technical Advisory Panel report. The hope is that these will give a better idea of how coastal flood risks are predicted to change in Hampton, so that you can better understand why it is critically important to incorporate coastal resilience into the Hampton Master Plan update. The first coastal hazard I'm going to talk about today is sea level rise. Sea levels have been rising and are projected to continue rising in the future. The chart on the screen shows observed or historic sea level data in the shaded side of the chart to the left. As you can see, sea level has been rising on our coast since about the 1900s, if not earlier. On the right is a range of sea level rise projections out to the year 2150 that could occur if global greenhouse gas concentrations begin to decline and eventually stabilize by the end of the century in 2100. The blue shaded area shows the likely range, and the other lines above it show less likely but still possible ranges of sea level rise. Again, assuming that greenhouse gas concentrations stabilize by the end of the century. To break this down for you a bit more, sea level in New Hampshire is likely to rise by half a foot to 1.3 feet by 2050, but could exceed 2.9 feet. Sea level in New Hampshire is likely to rise by 1 to 2.9 feet in 2100, but could exceed 8.7 feet. And sea level in New Hampshire is likely to rise by 1.2 to 4.6 feet by 2150, but could exceed 18.1 feet, although this is less likely. Note that sea level rise projections are much higher and much more concerning if greenhouse gas emissions continue to grow through the end of the century. As far as coastal storms are concerned, the science is a little less settled about what is going to happen to coastal storm frequency and intensity. That said, we are virtually certain that sea level rise alone will lead to an increased frequency and intensity of coastal flooding associated with coastal storms, including nor'easters and tropical storms, as the century progresses. Rising sea level means increasing flooding extent and depth, regardless of how storm intensity increases in the future. We also know that groundwater levels are expected to rise as a percentage of sea level rise up to 3 miles inland from the coast. The magnitude of that rise is expected to decrease as you go inland, so that the highest amounts of groundwater rise are expected closest to the coast. In low-lying areas, rising groundwater may approach or even rise above the ground surface, which could result in expansion of existing or creation of new wetlands, and pose challenges to underground utilities and infrastructure in developed areas. These can include water mains, road pavement, structures and foundations, drainage, and drinking water. The last coastal flood risk factor I want to talk about today is precipitation. Generally speaking, the frequency and magnitude of extreme precipitation events is projected to increase, particularly in the springtime throughout New England. There are a variety of different rainfall metrics that we can look at that help tell this story, so I've shown just one here. This graph on the screen shows that the amount of rainfall falling on the wettest day of the year is projected to increase by 8 to 15% by the end of the century, again, if global greenhouse gas concentrations stabilize. As a result of this increase in precipitation metrics across the board, the state is recommending that projects in New Hampshire account for at least a 15% increase in precipitation estimates. So what can we do? What actions can Hampton take to begin addressing these coastal flood risks? Adaptation, or advancing resilience, often consists of a combination of the following approaches. First, no action. This means maintaining the status quo and doing nothing. The second option, avoiding, refers to prioritizing future growth and investments out of harm's way and reimagining what land uses we could implement both in at-risk areas and on higher ground. To accommodate means to live with water, for example, by elevating buildings and infrastructure above projected flood levels, or by designing drainage systems to accommodate increased rainfall. Resistance refers to keeping water out of areas using engineered or nature-based coastal protection structures. And relocating, moving out of the way of the water and allowing for the natural landward migration of coastal ecosystems like salt marshes as sea level rises. Our hope is that by considering this context of changing coastal hazards and this information about different kinds of strategies that Hampton could take to minimize coastal flood risks, we will provide a framework for brainstorming about what kinds of actions the town can take to build its resilience in the future. Again, we'd like to hear from you about this. So if you're watching this before September or October 2020, send a text to the number here, 603-968-0712, or send an email to planhampton@gmail.com and answer the following questions. What are your top concerns regarding coastal hazards in Hampton? What are your priorities when considering resiliency projects? And what do you think the top things are that Hampton can do to help build coastal resilience? The next steps of this project are as follows. This presentation is part of the public participation process that the town of Hampton is undertaking to advance development of the master plan vision and coastal content. Opportunities for public participation will continue in the coming weeks, with public input being digested to inform a master plan vision and guide development of the master plan coastal content. Additionally, a coastal risk vulnerability assessment will be performed and a suite of resiliency and adaptation strategies developed to create an action-oriented coastal resilience and management section for the master plan. Both the vision and the coastal content will be made available for review by the public, by municipal staff and decision makers, and by the Master Plan Steering Committee before a final version is submitted. With the vision and coastal resilience content completed, the town will move forward into phase 2 of the Master Plan update with the important products of phase 1 in hand to guide further progress. Again, public participation is an essential part of this entire process. We strongly encourage everyone to participate by text message, email, and survey, as well as in future public engagement opportunities. We also invite public comment at our Master Plan Steering Committee sessions, which are held on the third Wednesday of each month during the Planning Board meeting. Visit the project website at tinyurl.com/planhampton to stay up to date on project progress and other participation opportunities. Thank you for your time.